Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Welcome, Mark Solon. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Joe. Sit down, sit down.
Sounded like the 12th man to me. Jessica, we switch you guys.
No pine
Switch
tar.
us. Oh, we're supposed to switch.
Really? Wasn't that crazy? 10 games he got suspended.
We could talk baseball all night.
We could talk baseball, hockey too.
Oh, so I heard you play hockey.
Well, I took this year off, but yeah.
Matt, where's Matt? Where's the
Where's
hockey
Matt?
team? Where are the hockey players? Yeah, Matt, where are the,
Nice.
okay, I know there's more here. They were here like 2 minutes ago. Yeah, so his
They're
hockey
drinking
team
beer
is
in the
here.
locker room.
I love it. Well, thanks for being here tonight with us.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah. Well, we're all excited to hear from you and jump into this. And so Mark's background, he was a managing partner, a partner with a private equity firm out in Boston, right? And then he jumped in with Highway 12 as a managing partner here with the venture capital firm Highway 12, if some of you guys are familiar with them. And now he's the managing director over at TechStars. And he said he's having the time of his life in his career right now. And we're excited to hear about that. So one of the things I want to start off with is the transition you had from Highway 12 over to TechStars. Talk to us through that process and what, life and decisions and why TechStars.
Let's see. About 3 years ago, I took a sabbatical, and my wife and my kids and I traveled around the world for 3 months during the summer, and just gave me a chance to reflect on, a long career in investing and working with startups, and just decided that it was time for a change, and thought I was going to do something pretty differently. So I looked at all sorts of things. I thought about opening up a bike shop in the North End, or actually was working on a business plan to buy the local minor league baseball team and build a stadium here. And then I realized that, wait a minute, I'm going to be working, the hardest working time of my career is going to be during the summers, and sort of summers in Idaho are like the greatest thing in the world. So that stopped in dead tracks. And right around that time, David Cohen, who's the founder of TechStars, and a really close friend of mine. I've been involved in TechStars almost since the inception as a mentor. I've spent a lot of time at the, where it started in Boulder. And David he told me he had an evil plan to get me involved in TechStars. I have invested in a lot of TechStars companies over the years. I just think it's one of the most unique, since the internet, the most unique thing to happen in company formation and technology startups. So I was really flattered and blown away when David asked me to come be his partner and help him scale this organization, and it's been the most gratifying work I've had in my career.
So tell me, what do you love about it? Like, what was that aha moment?
So before I actually started at TechStars, I spent 6 months. I told David, let's just, I want this next thing I do in my career to be the last thing I do, and I want to do it for a long time, and I want it to be really meaningful. And I had this list of things I wanted to be components of what I did next. So I said, let's just work together for 6 months, and let me just sort of try before I buy, right? And I went around to all the different TechStars programs around the country and just started working with a lot of the startups on their financing strategies. So I'd go to Boston and New York and Chicago and all the different places we had accelerator programs. And during my career, every time I've worked with a startup, it's usually because I was an investor and I was on their board, and they sort of had to listen to what I was saying, right? And this was really different. This was just sort of sitting in a room with a bunch of mostly first-time entrepreneurs, and being able to use the sum of my experiences and be able to just help them a little bit, like even just a little piece of advice or an introduction, and being able to leverage the network that I've had, that I've built up through my career, was just incredibly, incredibly gratifying. And after a few months of doing that, I went back to David and said, I'm in. I mean, it's incredibly gratifying work.
I love it. I think that's awesome. One thing I want to ask you about is, you spoke just a moment there about networking and everything you've built up through the years. And I think that that's something that everyone is interested in. Talk to us a little bit and give us some advice about networking and building a network, especially for a lot of us that maybe our networks are in Boise. How do you reach outside of Boise, and just your experiences and your advice?
Building networks. I mean, have an outgoing personality is probably number one.
Jump right in.
Jump right in. I mean, you know, at its heart, building a business and building your personal, like we all have personal brands now, right? We have Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and social media streams, but at the end of the day, you know, the thing that I find most compelling about working with startups is just the interpersonal relationships. You know, from raising money to recruiting people to your startup, to getting new customers, it's an intensely human experience. And for me, the fact that I work with a bunch of technology startups, I'm not a technologist, I don't code, I'm not an engineer, but I'm utterly fascinated with the interpersonal part of building a business and the human part of it. And when I go around the country and work with the startups at all of our accelerators, I spend a lot of time making sure that they understand it's not just about building a great product, and it's not just about having a great solution. It's about building meaningful relationships, whether it's with your founders or with your investors or with your customers. I think it's a part of building a business that's overlooked.
That's excellent. So talk us through what TechStars is doing right now and a little bit about the program. From how do you get in, what does the program look like, and then exits?
So are most people here familiar with TechStars? You know, it's a 3-month accelerator program. It's really a boot camp for startups, and a lot of people have the notion that TechStars is a curriculum, sort of a startup school, and it's really not. We've got 13 programs now. 6 or 7 of them are traditional city programs. Boston, New York. It all started in Boulder. Boston, New York, Chicago, Seattle, Boulder, Austin, Texas, London. But we also run accelerators with some of the most important companies in the country, like Nike and Disney and Barclays and a handful of others. So this boot camp is a very intense experience. We surround the mentors with about we surround the founders, the 10 companies that get in, with about 100 mentors per program. And they're mostly operators. They're mostly entrepreneurs who've built companies themselves, and they have a sense of civic pride, or they want to help the next generation of entrepreneurs. And it's amazing. The ethos of TechStars is really give first, and we're always blown away by how the mentors in our programs spend so much time and freely giving advice and helping these other startups. So we get about 1,000 applications on average per program, and 10 companies get in. So it's actually statistically harder to get into TechStars than MIT or Stanford or Harvard. And once those 10 companies get in, we always need at least 2 founders, and one of them have to be technical. We don't take single founder companies. And they get in, and it's a 3-month intensive program. The first month is what we call mentor whiplash. And we pair up the companies with the mentors, and you have a bunch of different mentors who've built companies, and they all have different sets of perspectives, and they all are telling the entrepreneurs extremely different, they're giving them extremely different pieces of advice. And by the end of the first week, the entrepreneurs are just, you know, their heads are spinning, and one person's telling them, you know, you should go after the consumer market, and the next mentor is saying, no, you shouldn't go after the consumer market, you should go after the enterprise market. And one mentor saying you should give it away and then, you know, build it up and then charge. And the next one saying, no, you should charge from the beginning. And it's an incredible experience. And imagine weeks of this, you know, with dozens and dozens of mentors telling you different things in one-on-one meetings. And then after about a month, once their head has been spun around so many times and they don't know which way is up, they sort of enter the next month is really focusing on product. Now that they've got some, you know, if you think about the first month, it's almost like the guardrails at a car wash that guide your car, you know, into that. That's sort of what we're doing during the first month of the program. And then once you've got sort of a true north and realize what you're, you know, where we're going to take this company, then it's really focused on product, right? We're going to dig in. We're going to get some product mentors around you and start working on the product. And then the third month of the program is helping them get ready for something we call Demo Day. So at the end of our 3-month program, we bring in hundreds of investors for a demo day where each company and each founder gets up on stage, does a 6 or 8 minute pitch about their company, and then we we introduce them to a bunch of investors. So we've had close to 400 companies now go through our various TechStars programs. They've raised over $500 million. On average, if you look across the entire TechStars system over the last 7 years, TechStars companies on average raise about $1.5 million, $1.6 million within a certain period of time after graduating the program. And if you go to techstars.com, we're really transparent about our results. So to date, 80% of the companies, and remember we started this, David started this in 2007, over 400 companies, 80% of our companies are still in business, 10% have been acquired, and only 10% are out of business. So the model really seems to be working.
That's awesome. So when they're leaving and exiting, are you guys helping them with that fundraising? How do you go through that process with the companies?
Well, the last month of the program is really coaching them on how to present, how to talk to investors, what investors are looking for. So it's a coaching process. But then, you know, the investment community, the angel and venture community, really has grown to look at TechStars as a source of deal flow. So, like I said, hundreds of investors show up at these demo days. So they're, you know.
That would be nice, right? You have 100 investors out there. That's what we'd all like in this room.
Well, you know, a lot of people say, you know, I hear all the time that we don't have enough capital here in Boise, right? I've been here for 15 years, and I ran a venture fund called Highway 12 Ventures here, and you know, for 15 years I've heard entrepreneurs say, if we just had more capital here, you know, we need more capital here. And I really think that's an artificial constraint that entrepreneurs are placing on themselves. There are great companies that have been built here and raised capital in Boise. You know, Ballyhoo and Bodo has raised over $15 million. First it was some angel money, and then Highway 12 invested some money, and then OpenView Ventures, you know, a large growth fund from Boston, came in and has invested well over $10 million into the company. And there's a Boston growth, you know, institutional growth firm invested in a little Boise company. And they didn't do it because Highway 12 invested. They didn't do it. They found the company. They didn't even know who we were. They did it because you know, investors. Has anybody heard of Andy Kessler, the writer? He was a Wall Street analyst for many years, one of the most famous analysts during the go-go years. So Andy Kessler is now a writer, and he wrote this great book called How We Got Here. He's got this notion, he talks about going back all the way to the tulip bubble in Holland in you know, a couple of hundred years ago, and then the implosion of the tulip bubble. And I love one of his quotes. He says, "Money sloshes around the globe looking for opportunity." And think about that. It happens here. Cradlepoint, great company here in Boise, has raised over $30 million from multiple venture capital firms. There's a company here in Boise called Ready Financial, started by a really bright guy named Will Tumulty, and he was able to raise money from Jeff Busgang of Flybridge Ventures in Boston. Nobody even knows that happened. And the company raised money from one of the best venture capital firms in Boston. They ultimately sold, made a lot of money for their investors, and they flew under the radar here in Boise. So I think it's a fallacy that you can't raise money in a place like Boise. Money finds great opportunities. You know, guys like me who invest in startups will find you, and you know, there's tons of angel money here in Boise. There's not a funding gap. If you think about, you know, there's 6 current or former Fortune 500 companies who've been headquartered here in Boise, right? You've got Boise Cascade and HP and Micron and Albertsons and Washington Group and Simplot. There's been a tremendous amount of wealth created by the executives of those, tremendous amount of wealth created for the executives of those companies. And they're here. Is it easy to find them? Do they have a shingle out saying, hey, I've got millions of dollars, I want to invest in startups? No. It takes hard work. And when I moved here in 2000 and raised Highway 12 Ventures' first fund, it was a $25 million fund. It took me 18 months to raise $25 million here in Boise. I had 300 meetings. It took me a year and a half and 300 meetings to raise $25 million. And I'd come home at night and I'd talk to my wife, Pam, and I'd say, this isn't going to work. And she'd kick me in the ass and tell me to get back out there. And, you know, she believed in me, and, you know, the rest is history. We raised $25 million. We had some modest success in our first fund. We sold the company to Google, and that let us raise another $75 million. And so I just think it's an artificial constraint that people impose upon themselves when they say we can't. Every startup community I go to around the country says they don't have enough capital. So how are all the startups getting funded if no community in America has enough capital?
Well, there is, because everyone thinks if you're not in the valley, what do we have? So let's say, I'm guessing that there's quite a few of you out here that are looking at investments right now and considering going in. What advice do you have for them? What do you guys need to have in order? What do the teams need to look like? You know, talk them through before they're going to go looking for investments. What do they need to have lined up?
You need to have, at TechStars we look for 6 things. Team, 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 market, opportunity, idea. Okay? Idea comes last. Team, 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 meaning the people are the 3 most important things in what we look for. Size of the market, the opportunity, and then the idea. Because we have a fundamental belief that a great team going after a big market opportunity is going to figure it out. Ballyhoo, when they started, you know, when Ballyhoo started, that business looked absolutely nothing like what it looks like today. It was a completely different business. But Pete Gombert was an awesome entrepreneur with some success. He had a good, solid plan going after a big market opportunity. And when the implosion of 2008 happened and the company almost hit the rocks, he was savvy enough to shift quickly, find another market opportunity that was more receptive given the macro events, and now has built one of the most important software companies ever to be built in the state of Idaho. So it really is about team, opportunity. That's what we're looking for.
Can you mention that company, that software company's name?
Ballyhoo.
Thank you.
B-A-L-I-H-O-O.
We're going to open up early for Q&A, so be thinking. I want to touch on a few things before
Yeah,
we
I
go.
want to talk about what you all want to talk about.
Yeah, so I want to kind of touch on, we're all here in Boise. Some of us have moved here for 90 days, but we're here in Boise. And when you're looking at the ecosystem here, you have a lot of experience in Boulder. And he's got a great excerpt in Brad Feld's book talking about the ecosystem there and the mentality there. It's an impressive community there. I like the mantra and the mentality there. Will you talk to us about Boise and things that we can do as a community to come together? I would love to see everybody connected, and we are helping buoy and lift startups that are here. And talk us through your experience.
So, I think one of the reasons. So a little backdrop about Boulder. So when I started investing, or when we started investing at Highway 12 Ventures in Boulder in 2003, we made our first investment in a little company called Atlas Software. They made 3D technology that allowed 2D images to become 3D. And if you're old enough to remember using Google Earth 15 years ago, it was 2D. Remember, you looked down on it. And Atlas Software developed technology, and Google wound up buying the company that allowed Google Earth to become 3D. And when we started investing in Boulder, there was no TechStars, there was no Foundry Group. Brad Feld was there, but he was a partner with a big national firm called Mobius. It was really just a sleepy little college town, much like Boise, with a couple of startups and not a lot of venture. And it wasn't even in the top 25 communities in the country as it relates to how much venture capital dollars were flowing to Boulder. This was 10 years ago. Wasn't even on anybody's radar map. Today, I'm sorry, anybody's radar. Today, 10 years later, after Silicon Valley, Boston and New York, Boulder, Colorado, a college town of 100,000 people, gets more venture capital dollars than any town in America. How does that happen? How does that happen in a decade? From going from not even on anybody's radar to the number 4 startup community in the world. And I really believe that, you know, people think, well, Foundry Group's there and Bradfeld's there and, you know, all this. TechStars is when things really started to take off. And what TechStars did for the community of Boulder was it became a lightning rod for startup activity. It became a single point of entry that all the mentors and all the experienced operators and entrepreneurs could rally around and get behind the next generation of entrepreneurs. So one of the challenges we have here in Boise is that there is no single point of entry. Everything's scattered. I get emails all the time from entrepreneurs, you know, and there's some in Bodo and out in Eagle and office parks, and you know, there is no nexus of activity. There's no place where all the mentors can gather and get behind the startup community. And what's really cool about what happened in Boulder is when TechStars started, it started with only about 20 mentors. Today there's well over 100 at TechStars Boulder, but it was this small group. And then with the first class, everybody was like, whoa, look at this. And mentors don't want to be bombarded with every single startup looking for help, because there are a lot of companies out there looking for help that aren't ever really going to get off the ground or create some, you know, they may be lifestyle businesses, but mentors want to get involved in great, you know, if you've built a company and you're going to volunteer your time, you want to do it in a high quality company. And what the mentors got was a highly curated group of startups that they could engage around and not only help, but they also enjoyed the interaction with each other. So there was intellectual stimulation between the mentor group, and it was a way, it became a lightning rod for activity. So I think that's one of the most unique things. And what happened, if you go to Boulder today, who's been to Boulder? All right, lots of people. Everyone knows Pearl Street in Boulder? So when I go to Boulder and I want to meet with a bunch of startups, or I go to board meetings there, you walk down Pearl Street. I park my car at the hotel right downtown Boulder. I never get in my car again. Every startup is within a stone's throw of Pearl Street. If you know Pearl Street, it's a bunch of brownstone. It actually looks a lot like 8th Street here, right? The 8th Street Marketplace. It's almost identical. And I can't understand, you know, I've met with the mayor and I've met with a bunch of the real estate owners here, and I've tried to get them to understand that by creating this sort of startup alley from Bannock to Bodo, we could create this sort of nexus of startup activity. But it takes everybody getting involved. It takes the landlords to understand that, you know, by lowering the rents for startups and maybe taking equity instead of cash, that over the long term we're going to build a bunch of value, and the whole ecosystem will prosper from that. But everything's really spread out here. There's no single point of entry. There's lots of little things happening here. Like I've even heard that there's 3 groups right now trying to create accelerators here in Boise. That's crazy. You know, one accelerator is the 3 groups should get together and build one accelerator. That's a really good idea. But having 3 groups trying to do the same thing and fragment our mentor pool, we're not going to create that sort of nexus of activity around a few great startups.
Well, I love your comment about a physical location for the startups. I know that there is a group, maybe you're part of this, that's trying to push this and working with Faisal and, I don't know, Mayor Beater, I think, is also involved. So when Spencer Tall, and we had last month, Spencer Tall from Allegiance Capital came out to visit and do Startup Grind with us, and we met with Mayor Beater about doing a physical location, and
I've met with Mayor Beater too.
This is great. So guys, if we all get together and we start this idea and keep pushing it, and the voice of the people keeps going, hey, startup corridor. You'll come up with some fancy name for it, I'm sure.
Bannock to Bodo.
Bannock to Bodo. There you go. It started here. I think it's a great idea. So we'll just keep this conversation going as we go.
Whatever we do, let's make sure we keep the word silicon out of it. I mean, and also potato. I mean, those two things, you know, there's Silicon Prairie and Silicon Alley and Silicon this. And Silicon was around, you know, an idea that has way past. There's Silicon Valley and there's everywhere else. And I don't think we should try and emulate any other community. We shouldn't even try and emulate Boulder. We should be the best Boise. Should be the best Boise we can be.
I love that idea because I love Boise. How many of you guys love Boise though? Yes. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. I think there's so many neat things here that I've lived. How many places? Where's my husband? How many places have we lived? 8? 13 cities. 8. We've lived everywhere, different countries, and we've never lived anywhere this long. I mean, we're really staying. And
so I've lived in over a dozen places, and in two more years I'll have lived in Idaho longer, or in Boise anywhere longer than anywhere I've ever been.
Join the club. We're joining the club. We're making the club. We're staying. Well, I'd like to open up to you guys right now. What I'm going to do is, for camera purposes, when you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come to you. Wait for a second. I'll give you the mic when my camera guys are ready, and then you can stay in the hot seat. But we definitely want anything you have for
You're going to stay here next to me, right?
You get to eat solo. Sorry. If you want to come stay with your husband, you can come. So anyone have a question for Mark? I know we have questions. Okay, hold on.
I can hear you. Oh, you need it for the mic?
Where is he? Yeah, please.
Logistical challenges.
Good.
I threw surprises last month, so they told me not to throw surprises. Go ahead.
So I'm working on a startup with a friend of mine now for a mobile app, and I was wondering if you could talk to when you go into a startup, what are kind of some of the most common mistakes that people make kind of starting off, just as far as structure, what they're doing, anything like that you've seen?
So the single biggest killer of startups is lack of focus. You know, trying to solve a whole bunch of problems. Every customer is asking you to do something differently. You know, focus, focus, focus. Do one thing awesome, and then go out and do different things. But I think that, as my experience suggests, that the single biggest killer is lack of focus.
So Mark, when you talk about team, I want to know what you look for in a team. So you said it 3 times. So what does team mean when you're VC looking for that? So I think it was in the 1960s, Justice Potter on the Supreme Court, when asked to define pornography, he said, "I can't define it, but I know it when I see it." It's a hard question to answer, George. It's a combination of things. You know, it's a set of experiences. It's trustworthiness. I really think that, you know, so many times, the one skill I've built over the last 20 years is really an amazing bullshit detector. It's probably my single best skill as an investor. Didn't have it early in my career, but it's amazing how many times I'll sit for an hour with an entrepreneur and they have all the answers, right? You know, they've barely gotten their company off the ground, yet they have all the answers. I really like to hear, you know, I don't know, I'm still trying to figure that out. So it's a combination of credibility and experience. It's salesmanship. It's the ability, you know, if you're going to build a great company and you don't have a degree of, or if somebody on your founding team doesn't have remarkable salesmanship skills, you're not going to be able to raise capital. You're not going to be able to recruit people. You know, when you're at a startup, you're trying to sell a vision, not just to your customers, but you want to recruit talent that's smarter and better than you are. And the only way you're going to be able to do that and get people to come work crazy hours for less money that they're working for today is really amazing salesmanship skills. So we're looking for a combination of all those things, George.
It was my experience in Utah the past 12 years that a lot of success that they've had in developing their economy with specific sectors, and among them technology-related sectors, originated with the strength of a very focused governor, a supportive mayor, but more importantly than that, an economic development infrastructure and a strong statewide chamber that really wanted badly to develop a Bannock to Bodo type of environment. Do you feel that we can accomplish that here in Boise, you know, given that we do have some different challenges than what they face?
It's an awesome question. So I do agree with you. Mike Leavitt's a really good friend of mine. I think he was a remarkable governor. He got in the headlights very early on with the importance of technology. He put it as one of the biggest missions he had. I also think that, I believe that the state of Utah really looks at education as a highest priority in that state, and they've developed a very educated workforce down there as it relates to technology, sciences, math and sciences. They've made a huge investment in that, so it creates an educated workforce to succeed. So, you know, Mike Leavitt did a great job of what he called shuttle diplomacy. He'd go to Silicon Valley every week on the shuttle and go talk about what a great place it was to build, and he was able to successfully recruit some great companies to Utah, Adobe, Twitter, and then Governor Huntsman followed on and did the same thing there. So there has been, for the last 15, 20 years, a very strong focus of technology in Idaho. The Utah Technology Council, of which the Idaho Technology Council, Jay Larson is sitting right behind you, the founder of the, you know, one of the reasons I got behind Jay when he came to me when he was just getting this off the ground was I was a member of the Utah Technology Council. We've invested in lots of Utah companies over the years, and I think it's one of the best startup communities in the country. Having said all that, I still think that there's a limited amount that government and municipal organizations can do to support the growth of startup communities. I think that because of the cycles of government and universities and municipalities, these organizations run in 2 to 4 year cycles. And the metrics with which they measure themselves are very different than the way entrepreneurs think in building companies. So there's a tension there between what government and organizations and municipalities want to accomplish in short time frames that doesn't necessarily jibe with an entrepreneurial time frame. So I think that there's great ways to contribute, but I don't think that those organizations can lead. I think that they're fantastic contributors to the growth of these new knowledge-based startup communities, but to build a vibrant startup community, it really has to be entrepreneur-led. It has to be led by people who have a very long-term vision, because it doesn't happen overnight. It did in Boulder. That was really an amazing phenomenon. But, you know, I've been here for 15 years. I plan on being here the rest of my life. I love this town. And I don't think of my participation in the Boise startup community as being in year 15 of 20. I think it as being in year 15 of 35. It's the next 20 years, right? So I think, but who here is an entrepreneur? Awesome. Great. As a matter of fact, let's have a little exercise. This will be fun. Everybody stand up. Okay? Seriously, everybody stand up. So, if you're an entrepreneur, stay standing Everybody else sit down. Okay? If you're an entrepreneur and you love Boise and you think it's amazing, stay standing. Awesome. Now, if you're an entrepreneur and you love Boise and you think it's incredible and you think you'll be here 20 years from now, or I'm sorry, if you don't think you'll be here 20 years from now, sit down. Wow, nobody sat down? All these entrepreneurs who love Boise and think it's amazing, you think you'll be here in 20 years?
From here. How about that question?
So, everybody who sat down, look around. These are your leaders. These are the people who can make this a better startup community. They're the ones who have the long-term vision. They're the ones who can make things happen. So, to answer your question, and everybody can sit down now. But it takes those people and the energy that they're going to put into the startup community to make things happen. And you know, how many people went to the two great events yesterday, the Tech Cocktail and Develop Idaho? Really amazing event, right? High energy, great speakers. Those events are really important for a startup community. But today is the hangover, right? Everybody got out yesterday and got drunk on the euphoria of all the great things that are happening here and the energy, and 450 people showed up to celebrate our startup and technology. But everyone went back to work today, and I'm not sure there are any action items or things being done as a result of yesterday. So I don't want to diminish the importance of a great event yesterday. It was really great. But what we need is lots of doing things like hackathons. Like you go to Boulder, there's a hackathon every week. Or, you know, for a while we had 1 or 2 startup weekends here, but I haven't seen a startup weekend here in a year. You know, things like hackathons and startup weekends are much more important than 450 people showing up to congratulate each other on what a great startup community we have. I'm not one second. I'll get to you, Larry, or Lawrence. Are we more formal tonight, Lawrence? I am not diminishing the importance of events like yesterday. They're important for enthusiasm and all of that. But the real meat of building a startup community is on making things and doing things, and there's not enough of that happening in Boise. I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see Startup Weekend. You know, I'll participate. Let me give you another story. So in 2011, I brought David Cohen, the founder of TechStars, when I was still running Highway 12 Ventures. I brought David Cohen, the founder of TechStars, here to Boise to speak, and we were at the water cooler. We had a great crowd. It was great energy. And David talked about the importance of mentoring and how that really energized the startup community in Boulder. And what he did was he challenged everybody. He said, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're in technology, raise your hand. And everybody raised their hand. And he said, how many of you are mentors? Like 2 people raised their hand. How many of you are mentoring startup companies? And I think 2 people raised their hand. And he goes, that's the problem. He goes, you're all mentors. If you have specific skill sets, you can contribute. So in the audience that night was a guy, I wish he was here tonight. I think he's home with his kids. I spoke to him earlier today. His name is J.D. Mullen. He's a senior software architect. And at the time, he was working for a big company, Sybase, here in who had an office here in Boise. And you know, he was so inspired by the way David talked about how anybody can be a mentor that he contacted me the next day and goes, how can I help? What can I do? And we sat and we talked about it, and JD came up with the idea of, even though he was working at a big company and he was an engineer and he had never worked with startups before, he started something called CS Extras, Computer Science Extras. And he started holding classes for any engineers, and JD was a very accomplished senior software architect. You know, young, new engineers, he started these classes. He just donated his time to teach new experiences, how to work with different types of languages inside different types of businesses. And today, 4 years later, over 1,000 people have been through JD's classes, and it's now passed on to another gentleman who's running CS Extras. And I'll tell you that just JD by himself, with one idea about how to give back and mentor, has created more value than all of the events we've put on together. And nobody knows about it, but you know, one guy, through giving back and giving first, and he never asked for anything in return. He never had any expectations in return. But one guy had an impact on 1,000 people who learned something from it. And JD is like my hero here in Boise. I think he's just amazing. And I think everyone in this room, if you've got a set of skills, you're a mentor. And you can mentor somebody at a startup with those skills. If you're an expert in marketing, you can help somebody with a startup on their marketing ideas. If you have finance expertise, you can help. And there are points of engagement here in Boise. Find them. You know, I think it's, you know, one of the things we need is more activity around where are all the startups. You know, I think I'm really excited about one startup here in particular, Meal Ticket, started by Brian Conrath. Brian worked in he had a software development shop himself, and he came up with this idea of sort of creating software in the backbone for the food industry, really boring. And I got to know the business a little bit and got his idea, and he got into Boulder TechStars and went through the whole program and came back, and now he's building a really important software company here in Boise. And Brian put together a map of where all the startups here in Boise, and I'm really excited to see somebody who actually went through the TechStars program in a place like Boulder, and Brian's starting to take sort of that leadership role here in Boise, and his CEO, Wink Jones, and you know, guys like Brett at Retrolux. You know, I'm really excited to see young, energetic entrepreneurs taking leadership positions in the community, because that's the way we're going to make things happen.
Mark, would you talk a little bit about your suggestions for non-tech firms that are looking for capital and financing to get started and go?
Oh, it could be tech, it could be dog food, it doesn't matter. I think raising capital, I think you have a better chance, actually, of raising capital for a brick-and-mortar business in Boise than a tech company. I think most of the wealth that's been created here in Boise actually didn't come through technology. It's a lot of ranchers and farmers and guys who made, or real estate guys who made their money in ag or dirt, right? And I think they will understand brick and mortar businesses better than they will, you know, some newfangled social media platform, because they don't even, you know, pay attention to that stuff. So I think raising capital is about hard work and perseverance and leveraging your network and having salesmanship and all of those skills. I think the type of business is really irrelevant. That, you know, raising money is raising money.
And just to follow on, what I'm hearing you describe is it's more about finding the private investors, perhaps, than angel or venture capital that might be where tech gets it.
So I think private investor and angel is really interchangeable. I mean, individuals who make investments in startup companies are really known as angels. As far as venture capital or institutional capital, they will find you. You know, if you talk to a guy like Pete Gombert, who built Ballyhoo, by the time Pete got to the stage where he was ready for venture capital, he was getting calls from venture capitalists. You know, it is, you know, most venture capital firms have a bunch of young woodchucks dialing for dollars, trying to find great opportunities. And as soon as you create some degree of recurring revenue in an enterprise market, you know, the VCs will find you. I promise you. If you build a quality company that's a bit, you know, the VCs are not going to be interested in a company that you think you can grow to $5 or $10 million in revenue and maybe sell for $20 million. That's not interesting. If you're building a business that you think you can scale to $100 million in revenue or more, they'll find you.
or I'll help them find you.
Hi. Hi. You have a fantastic energy.
Thank you.
And it shows. When I was in the 5th grade, I was climbing oak trees in mid-Oregon, taking the mistletoe back up to Tacoma, Washington, and selling it during the recess.
This is an entrepreneur.
Until the principal came to the class and pulled me out of the class. I had most of my inventory sold and said I can't do that anymore. That was a significant emotional event in my life. Then, when I was going to school at Pacific Lutheran University, I got tired of pure academics and convinced the dean that I could start an entrepreneurs club at Pacific Lutheran University. And when we would go out into business and bring in entrepreneurs that were on television, everyone on the school campus wanted a seat in the auditorium. So there's a passion to understand what is an entrepreneur, what drives that person, where's the enthusiasm and the excitement come from, and damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, determination. You were mentioning mentoring, and I wonder if you could address the culture of a community, such as Boulder, Irvine, Palo Alto, the culture that touches the student before they're even out of high school, that inspires where the seeds are fertile, so that by the time they get out of high school, they know what they don't want. They do not want a job, they do not want a boss, and they want to lead their own ship. What have you seen being done at the early stages of entrepreneurs so they don't get killed through the bureaucracy of government?
So, let's see. I think there are younger people starting companies than ever in the history of our country right now.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, you know,
there's a trend, right? Drop out of school and make
you know, there's a whole trend of kids coming out of high school and starting companies instead of going to college. And there's a very relevant discussion going on around the merits of that, that you actually get a better education from actually being in a startup than going to college. It's a tension in my head as I've got 2 teenagers, and now that being part of TechStars and seeing the education of people going through, you know, startups, and the courage that the courage and character that develops from being part of something entrepreneurial, doesn't matter if it's tech or whatever. You know, I don't, it's early to tell where my kids are going. They're 9th and 10th graders, but I hope that one of the reasons I actually decided to join David and do TechStars was I really wanted to expose my children to being entrepreneurs. I think it's an incredibly rewarding way to spend your life. Maybe it's because, you know, even though I've been an investor most of my career, what I've done actually in building Highway 12 Ventures was very entrepreneurial, and I think it's because I'd be a terrible employee, right? I just know that about myself. But I'll give you a great example of something locally that is happening here that I'm terribly excited about, is what they're doing at Boise State University right here in Venture College. I don't know if you know anything about it, but they're creating a curriculum here. I don't know if Mary Andrews is here, but there's a great program here at BSU that just started this year called Venture College, and students are earning credits by doing something entrepreneurial. And they're having mentors from around the community helping these students, you know, no matter how small or niche these ideas that they have are, they're teaching them the ethos of being an entrepreneur.
Are there any students here from the Venture College?
Are there any students from Venture College here?
I was going to say, I think we had a few.
You applied?
Yeah, so I'm waiting to hear back.
Awesome.
It
So
just ended this week,
why don't-
right? The applications
Why
are
don't
just
you
due.
tell Larry what it's all about?
I don't know, I was just kind of seeing it in my community. Just kind of, my dad he owns storage sheds, so that kind of fueled my drive for wanting to become an entrepreneur.
It's awesome. It's great. Yeah, so it's actually one of the things I've seen happen here locally that I'm most excited about. I think it's terrific. And right up the alley of the question you asked.
First, I want to thank, I'm Carrie with SBA, so I'm in the U.S. Small Business Administration.
Awesome. Hi, Carrie.
That's why I'm not an entrepreneur. But I think both Katie and I take the attitude at our full-time jobs that it's very entrepreneurial. So, and I appreciate everybody paying our salaries. I first want to thank you for bringing up the Venture College. I think that's a fantastic program, and there actually was a startup weekend this weekend here in this building, which is pretty cool. I don't
Part
know
of the National Startup Weekend?
not the national, but Boise State did it with
Awesome.
Startup Idaho or something. So that was cool. And then I wanted to touch on just a few things. You were mentioning the schools. Junior Achievement in Idaho is actually approved curriculum for grade schools and through high school. So that obviously they match up the curriculum with the appropriate grade level. So that is an initiative that has been started in our schools, touching on Larry's question. I also wanted to ask you, Mark, in Utah, they have about 16 SBICs, which is partially funded with SBA seed money. I wanted to know your opinion on whether or not it's a good idea for Idaho to try to establish an SBIC.
So you'll have to forgive me because I know just enough about SBIC to be dangerous. And I know that SBIC 10 years ago was fairly complicated, and it's been made a lot easier since the recent administration. It's been much easier to access. I've read a little bit about it, but I can't understand why it wouldn't be a good idea to do it here. What would be the disadvantage?
Sorry, I gave the mic up. I could probably talk loud enough.
Yeah,
You guys can hear me.
Go ahead. That would have to be recorded.
I'm not sure from, you were mentioning that it wasn't difficult for companies in Boise to find money if they're meeting the right criteria that venture capital will find them. So from a funding perspective, for us to go out and market, and keep in mind I can't do that at my day job, but if I were to work with a group of highly savvy, fund building type, would it be beneficial for us to go and seek out 20, 25 million or more to build that with the matching funds that we could get from SBA?
Seems like a great idea to me.
Okay, so I'm looking for volunteers.
Well, we're just about out of time here.
No, we're not. We're good.
Well, for our formal section.
Okay.
But I want to do something and interject for a second. We kind of touched on mentorship a little bit tonight, and everyone is a mentor. And one of the things we have going on with all the directors and discussions is this little saying that givers gain nirvana. And we really think that's true. I think that giving is the best part of the essence of humanity. Lawrence is going, quotable quote, Twitter is at Startup Grind Boy. You know?
I'm going to quote you on that, on YouTube, right?
There you go, YouTube it. There you go, we'll do it. So I'm going to throw some of you guys under the bus for a moment, and Vince, or you guys, just follow me or don't worry. I'm going to call on some of you guys, and I want you to share how you can offer something to anyone in this room, or anything that you're doing right now. Dave, what are you guys working on that you can offer?
So right now we're in the middle of offering something Tom's working on it a lot too, where we're actually developing a mentor program with a capital program that's coming with it, and people like Bob Locken are part of it. George Mulhern, Von Hansen, a lot of, but those are just some of the ones, and they're going to be a whole broad swath of people that are going to come in and have great knowledge. They can go ahead and help us come in and offer advice to what you're doing. And then the other part of this is that I think Mark's right on this. Sometimes people get an excuse that you can build capital equations, kind of one of those things that you take as an excuse because you don't have all the other fundamental things done. So this will help us get the fundamental things done. And then the other part of this is we're going to start looking at some other access to capital, like maybe a fund-to-funds opportunity or something like that, where or Highway 12 was a recipient of some of those funds too. Allegiance have got $5 million from the fund-to-funds and actually made $42 million investment in Utah after the $5 million. And I'm not sure how many you.
You're talking about the Utah Fund of Funds.
Yes,
yes. I think the best model in the country for how to spur venture capitalists to invest. So a lot of states try and incent venture capitalists to invest in their states, and they force the venture capital firm to open up an office in their state in order to receive the money. What Utah did, which I think was brilliant, was they put no constraints on the venture capital firm. So they raised $100 million and they invested in venture capital firms, and they said, you don't have to open up an office here. You don't have to invest a single dollar here. All we ask is that your partners, not your junior guys, not your associates, but all we ask is that a partner from your firm, a decision maker, somebody who could actually write a check, spend a day or two a month in Utah. That was the only requirement. So we got $5 million at Highway 12 Ventures, and the only string attached to that capital was that I spent a day a month in Utah meeting with companies. And I thought it was brilliant. Now, all these other states had these programs to, get venture capital firms from Silicon Valley and Boston and New York and other places to invest in their states. And they'd open up, what would the firms do? They'd open up an office, they'd staff it with a young associate who had absolutely no pull in the firm, and no investments happened. Where Utah put out $100 million and got, a multiplier effect of $300 or $400 million invested in the state because they got the partners to actually spend time there, meet with startups, and what happened? There were really interesting startups there. So I hope that if we do that here, Jay, that we don't put those constraints and say, hey, you have to open up an office in Idaho. Just come see what we're doing.
Do you need enabling legislation now with the session that will be coming up next January?
I'm sorry, Larry.
Do you need enabling legislation
Absolutely.
to replicate
The
that?
legislature of the state of Utah, this came out of the state budget. It was $100 million out of the state budget.
But do you think Idaho needs that enabling legislation? And if so, who can volunteer to help create that enabling legislation before the next?
Jay's volunteering. Jay wants.
So the Idaho Technology Council is the advocacy group for the technology community in Idaho.
And we've been discussing the same thing. Do a time commitment, not any other stipulations. And we have a lot of VCs offering to mentor that program if we were to establish it. I think one of our hindrances is having a local presence on the ground to help manage any investments that are here. So down the road, I want to talk to you more, because that's the one thing that I think would be the only obstacle, and we could pull this together and really trigger a nice ripple effect.
Solved.
Yeah. Ryan, can I pick on you? What are you offering?
I just committed to help mentor the young startups with Jay.
Oh, high five. That's awesome. Anyone else? Bill, I don't know you. Bill, what do you offer?
Well, I'm kind of new to this whole world, so I'm just kind of soaking it in. But my expertise is data analysis and product management, which I've been kind of exploring getting involved with that in a startup coming from a large corporation. So that's what I've been doing, and kind of from a consultant basis is what I'm kind of looking at doing. But
Brett, what's the website for the startup map?
I think it's startupboise.org, and it's definitely available at startupboise.com on there, but I think he also still has startupboise.org.
It's a great, I think your skill sets are fantastic for some of the startups here in town, so go to startupboise.com and you'll be able to track some of them down.
Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome.
Well, I think I can offer a set of Ginsu knives at just $19.95. You meant. No, I'm a software developer, but I've pretty much worn all hats in software business. So if anyone's looking to do a startup, I'd be happy to sit with them. I have more mistakes than I have successes at this point, but hopefully I'm on to success now. But I'd be happy to talk through things with people. So.
Brian, I'll pick on you. Anything? This is Brian Payne.
Hi. First of all, I want to say this is just an incredible journey coming to Boise. And this has been one of the nights that really shows me the type of people that are in Boise and the commitment to grow the entrepreneurial startup business and to help each other. In terms of what I have to offer, earlier today, a young person was asking me some questions, and he wanted to know about entrepreneurialism, and he wanted those secrets. And I said to him, it's really difficult to give secrets. There's 25 years that I've owned a business, run businesses, faced challenges, made a lot of mistakes, still do, and but I gave him advice. And what I have to offer is, if anyone reaches out to me, I'm more than willing to talk and help them succeed. People have done the same for me. I'm getting a little choked up. So I believe that what comes around goes around, and yeah, anything I can do to help someone, if they ask, I'll do. So.
And that's kind of what we're about at Startup Grind, is anything we can do. Like Mark has said, you guys are the focus, you guys are the leaders in this, and you guys are the voice. And we just hope to amplify that voice. We hope to inspire that voice. We hope to cheer you on. If nothing else, Brian can attest, I will be your biggest cheerleader. And I will help you in any way we can, in any network we can, to help you guys succeed. And I just want to say a huge thank you. Thank you for coming tonight and helping and speaking to all of us. And Mark has said he will stay until every last question tonight is answered. So this is a great opportunity. Get your TechStars quality advice and mentorship from Mark. But let's hear it for Mark. Thank you so much.